Hello everyone, I'm Vince White. I'm an employment attorney, and today I'm answering a publicly posted question. It was posted by a gentleman that I consider to be a bit of a scholar, or who exists in the scholarly economics world, and it's tied to a question of religious accommodation in the workplace. So I'm going to start off with an example, a hypothetical that's not really the question, but I want to provide a little bit of background. So we'll talk about Christians because I grew up Christian, and so it's easier for me to talk about that faith because I'm more familiar with the realms of Christianity, right, a little bit. And you're going to have some Christian sects, some sects of Christianity who are not allowed to work on their Sabbath day. It is part of the rules and the tenets of their faith. They are not allowed to work on their Sabbath day. And that generally speaking, would require that an employer grant that religious accommodation. If the employer is large enough and if the employer is reasonably able to do so, they would have to make room in the schedule, really do something to accommodate that individual whose faith absolutely and in the rules very clearly requires them to not do labor on the Sabbath day, right? Now, there's a whole bunch of other groups of Christians who don't require you to not work on the Sabbath day. And there's a whole other group of Christian sects that say, hey, we'd prefer you don't work on the Sabbath day, but you got to do what you got to do. It's the modern world, right? Generally speaking, if it's not a required tenet of your faith, then employers are not going to be really pushed to accommodate you under the law. And that's going to be a little bit different from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but we're speaking generally about the federal laws for religious accommodation right now, right? And every jurisdiction is going to be different. Every state's a little different. Local municipalities have different rules. But generally speaking, that's the rule. So you might have a faith where somebody comes in and says, hey, I feel very strongly that I should not work on the Sabbath. I said, great. I really respect that. I hope you can do that. What does your faith say about that? Oh, it doesn't say that's a rule. Okay. Well, then it's not a rule, right? It's not a rule. And I feel that it's strange that you feel very strongly that you must not work on the Sabbath are enrolled in a Christian sect that does not require that of you. The employers are not going to have the same duty to accommodate you because that's not a rule, right? So the question that was posted was, and I'm not as familiar with the Jewish faith, but the question was posted that almost all Jewish men who are very religious will wear the yarmulke, right? As a sign of their faith and as part of their religious observances. But apparently, according to this gentleman, that is not required. That is not a requirement of their faith. And then the question becomes, is it religious discrimination in the workplace if an employer says, you can't wear that? That's a complex question because it's not required, but why are you specifically singling out one kind of headgear, one kind of headwear, right? So is the rule no hats? If the rule is no hats for any employee ever, no matter what, and then your employee says, but I want to wear my yarmulke. And you say, well, it's not required by your faith, so no, then I think the employer probably has a strong argument there, right? That may not be seen by most courts as religious discrimination because the employer has a no hats policy. But then this person who asked this question goes on to ask, apparently women in the Jewish faith at certain levels of religious observance feel it is required of them to cover their hair. Okay, if it's required, and it's required by the tenets of their particular sect of Judaism, well, then that is something that's going to require the religious accommodation dialogue. It's going to be a requirement, so it's going to then require that reasonable accommodation dialogue of can the business reasonably accommodate this religious requirement of yours, right? And that's a whole other video, right? You're going to get into, there's religions who require beards. that you let your beard grow, right, and flow freely. Okay, well, that is probably pretty great in most situations, but in certain situations, like working with very dangerous machinery, where the beard can become entangled and kill you, or in certain situations like a prison guard, where the beard, many states have argued, puts the individual at risk because the beard is a handle for which you can be attacked and it can be used against you in a fight, a tussle, so to speak. There's always going to be, it's a very complex determination what is and is not reasonable when it comes to religious accommodation. But that is kind of a quick statement of the lay of the land of the concept of religious accommodation in the workplace, and I hope that's useful in some way. I don't think it's going to end any discussions, but I hope it provides background and context to some discussions. And I wish you all the best. Hope everyone has a good day and that everyone is being accommodated for their faith in whatever ways they might need.